Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ope and I'm a self-proclaimed bookworm. Today I'll be doing a quick recap of all the books I read in November. I do not know what was up with me in November, but I wanted to read literally everything but what I had actually planned to read. I was really excited about all the manga I had picked out for the month, and I got through them pretty easily and enjoyed all of them. The same thing with 𝒻𝓇𝒾𝓃𝒹𝓈 novels. I read 𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈 and I also uploaded a separate video reviewing the series. If you're interested in watching that, there will be a link in the description or in the corner of this video. But the other books I had picked out were a bit iffy, and the only one I was able to get through without feeling like I was forcing myself to read it was If I Had Your Face. So I'll just go ahead and get started with that one. Then I'll go over other books that I had picked out before moving on to manga and webtoons. This is most likely the book I'll talk about the most. It was my favorite book of the month alongside 𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈. And just for a quick tangent before my review, I think the girl on the cover looks like the Korean solo artist Sunmi. Or am I bugging? Okay, I'll go back to the review. If I Had Your Face is a literary fiction by Francis Cha set in Seoul, South Korea, and follows the lives of 4 women who are pursuing their different dreams and ambitions in the city while dealing with the societal pressures of beauty and other issues plaguing their society, like gender roles in marriage, workplace, and wealth inequality, the role of shame in a society that is so focused on appearances, and how addictive surgery can become despite the crippling debt it puts most people in because of the beauty culture in South Korea. Beauty is an obsession, and it doesn't stop at how you look. It's also how thin you are, how you dress, how you are perceived, and putting up appearances. There's this persona that is promoted as ideal, and you can see it reflected in their idol culture. Idols are expected to act a certain way, and once they stray from that idea, it becomes this over-exaggerated scandal. There were a lot of the women's experiences in the book that I think all women can just relate to globally, regardless of the environment or culture that you've been raised in. And then there were also parts that were specific to South Korea as a society, and even some of the culture-specific aspects were still somewhat relatable to me as an African woman. It's this culture of wanting to save face and keep appearances, sometimes to the detriment of other people's well-being. The pressure for women to get married to the point of almost making them look desperate, and how divorce is frowned upon no matter how terrible your marriage is. And even when some people do go through with it, it's this extremely shameful thing. And in the face of all of these, the author weaves a tale about female strength, resilience, and the solace that friendship can provide while you're going through all of these struggles. This book is very much the female perspective on life, and it is very, very relatable. It's actually depressing how relatable it was, because it means that women are just experiencing the same thing in different fonts all over the world. My key takeaway from the book, however, though, is that someone will always be better, smarter, more beautiful than you, and then someone will always think those things about you as well. The same way you envy other people is the same way you are the envy of others. But envy and comparison will steal your joy. So more than anything, let us learn to love ourselves and be confident in who we are. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved it very much and recommend it. If literary fiction is a genre you enjoy, or one that you are looking to read more books in, or even if you're curious about the culture of beauty in South Korea, it'll be a quick, enjoyable read to squeeze in before the year ends. The next book I read is The 4 Agreements by 𝒁𝓇𝒾𝓃𝓹. I think this was the book that triggered my lack of interest in reading anything else. The book is based on ancient Toltec wisdom and is summarized as a book where the author reviews the source of self-limiting beliefs that rob us of joy and create needless suffering. All 4 agreements are written inside the inner leaf of the cover. The first one, be impeccable with your word. Second, don't take anything personally. Third, don't make assumptions. And then lastly, always do your best. I love the concept of the book and the idea of being in control of how we react to the actions of others. And with the book being such a small one, I was expecting to get through it in 1 sitting or 2 days at most, but I did not finish this book. This is the 3rd book I marked as a DNF all year. I don't know if I just wasn't in a space to read and truly appreciate it, but it wasn't hitting the way I expected it to. I liked the general idea of it and the concept, but I was just really struggling to read it. I might pick it up some other time and find that I'm able to appreciate it much better, but that time was not now. I usually drop books I'm not enjoying about 25% in, but I got to about 50% on this one because it's a really small book. It has less than 150 pages, and I was going to just tell myself to push through it and finish the entire thing, but at some point I actually felt like I was punishing myself by reading it when there were other things I could spend my time doing and I will actually enjoy. So that was my cue to just let it go. And since I did not finish reading it, I cannot rate it. So that was the second book I read. The next book I read was A Man Called 𝓁𝓈 by 𝒁𝓁𝒾𝑒𝓃𝒹𝓈. My introduction to this author was through another work of his titled Anxious People. I loved that book very much, and I also wanted to try something else by the author. This was the last book I read, and I actually ended up borrowing an audio version of the book from the library, and it was what I listened to on my drive to and from work for about 2 weeks until I was done reading it. The story is about this grumpy, methodical, bitter, and inflexible man called 𝓁𝓈 who thought everyone was lazy, stupid, or incompetent. So basically a boomer. He acts like he knows everything, and his response to people trying to teach him things he clearly doesn't know is, "You think I don't know that?" And I know this description paints him as a terrible person, which is the initial impression most people will probably get from reading the first couple of chapters in the book, but none of this makes him a bad person, just a really annoying one. And there's a saying I heard a long time ago that comes to mind when I think of his character. I'm paraphrasing here, but it goes something like, anyone is likable if you take the time to know them. No matter how annoying someone is, if you take the time to know them or just learn and understand what makes them who they are, there are parts of them that will become likable to you. People have bad days, and that doesn't excuse rudeness or bad behavior, but showing people grace every now and then does go a long way. 𝓁𝓈 was a bitter and rude man, but beneath the exterior everyone saw was an extremely loyal man. He did what he thought was right, and he had been through a lot. So much so that he had given up on living until a young couple with 2 kids moved in next door and threw all his plans in disarray. The book is a comical and heartwarming story of unexpected friendship, and there are parts of it that will tug on your heartstrings. I am a huge fan of 𝒁𝓁𝒾𝑒𝓃𝒹𝓈's writing and storytelling. They flow very well, and that makes them easy to read and listen to. So I did enjoy the book and will rate it 4 stars. Now onto the fun stuff, manga and webtoons. I'll start with one that I've already wiggled into other videos I uploaded in November, and that is the shoujo series My Love Mix-Up. This is the manga series I'll talk about the most. I loved this series very, very, very much, and I'll just go ahead and say that it was a 5-star read for me before even diving into the review. The setup of the series is hilarious and creative, but it still manages to be a wholesome, fluffy, heartwarming, and emotional story with very well-written and developed characters. The story has a high school setting, and it begins with the main character, Aoki, borrowing an eraser from his crush, Hashimoto, only to discover that she has written the name of another one of their classmates, Ida, on the eraser. Aoki is distraught, but that feeling only lasts for a moment when he accidentally drops the eraser, and Ida picks it up with the assumption that the eraser belongs to Aoki. I hope you're able to follow this storyline. And rather than correct the assumption by revealing his crush's crush, Aoki decides to take one for the team and just go along with it, leading to a very interesting mix-up that sparks relationships that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Aoki tries to be supportive of Hashimoto's love, and he develops the most adorable relationship with her. Similarly, his relationship with Ida grows from the mix-up. And now this is a shonen ai or BL story, so the main couple is Ida and Aoki, which made me a little bit worried about Aoki's relationship with Hashimoto since they like the same person, or even the possibility of Ida finding out that Aoki's feelings for him was a mix-up. But both of my worries were handled fairly quickly in a drama-free fashion through communication. The misunderstanding or miscommunication trope does not last long in this series at all, and all the characters did a pretty good job of communicating with each other and resolving their misunderstandings. This is just a story of 2 teenagers falling in love, and it was adorable. There was a point in the last volume where I thought the mangaka was about to throw all of their hard work down the drain, but there was no need for me to be worried, and I'm not gonna lie, I cried when the series ended because I just wanted it to keep going. I got attached to all the characters because they were so well written individually, but their interactions with each other were also very genuine, and I just love the series and the characters with my entire heart. This is my baby now, and I will never shut up about it, so be prepared for that. The next manga series I read was Last Gender by 𝒁𝓁𝒾𝑒𝓃𝒹𝓈. This is an LGBTQ series set around a bar called Bar California. that is hidden from the public, where people of different genders and sexual orientations gather in search of themselves, love, or sex. The first volume follows the stories of some patrons of the bar who identify as non-binary, a trans woman, someone who was aromantic, and another one who was pansexual. And the manga does a good job of presenting these different sexualities and genders. It also touches on how rejection and loneliness are a very common part of the lives of people who don't identify as cis or straight. I don't think the goal here is to feel invested in any of the characters, but rather to understand and be educated on the LGBTQ community. And I think the manga did do a good job of touching on that. I didn't realize this series was complete in only 3 volumes until I read the first 2 volumes, but from what I've read in these 2 volumes, I think they can be read as standalones, as each volume covers stories of different people, and the goal isn't necessarily to give them a happy ending. If anything, it felt like it was to shed light on who they were and educate the reader on those different identities. So even though I haven't read the last volume, I don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything, but I do plan to read it eventually. The last physical manga I read is the first omnibus of the series Don't Call It Mystery by 𝒻𝓇𝒾𝓃𝒹𝓈, the author of the fantasy series Basara. This is an episodic crime mystery series that is a bestseller in Japan due to its very successful drama adaptation. The story follows this guy on the front cover, Totono, a curry-loving, introverted boy who just loves his me time, but he ends up getting dragged into one mystery after another. In this first omnibus, he was accused of murder and got caught in a bus jacking as well. But his calm demeanor, paired with his ability to read situations while providing social commentary, makes the series an interesting read. His know-it-allness doesn't come off as showy. It is, however, annoying to a lot of people who are subjected to it, but not to the extent that you want to stop reading. Some people are even appreciative of that ability. At some point in this omnibus, he had the police consult him on a case, and the series just evokes this curiosity that keeps the reader invested in the story. So the second volume in the series ended with an introduction to the next mystery that will be covered in the next omnibus that Totono ended up getting himself dragged into, and I'm really excited to read it. The next 2 manga series I'll be going over are series I read on Kindle Unlimited. The first one is a side character's love story, and I read this one under the impression that it was a completed series. So imagine my shock when I got to the end of the 16th volume and it didn't feel like an ending, because this is an ongoing series. I'm not sure where I got my information from, but I do wish that I had looked into it a little bit better. And the reason I'm saying that is because I wouldn't have picked this up had I known it was ongoing, because I just know that I'm going to forget about this series if the updates are inconsistent or hard to find. Regardless, this was an enjoyable series and I will rate it 5 stars. It is a slow-paced coming-of-age love story, and it follows the main character, Nobuko, a shy and reserved girl who starts to develop feelings for one of her co-workers. Nobuko and her love interest, Hiroki, are university students who work part-time together at a department store. They are both very shy and reserved, but they both come to the realization that they have feelings for each other. And the series is so much more than just them falling in love with each other and eventually dating. It dives into their personal growth, their growth as a couple, and all the stages that come with the transition to adulthood. I have so many screenshots from this manga that just resonated with me personally. Nobuko and Hiroki's relationship is slow-paced, which might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it worked perfectly for them. And I loved how the manga touched on major stages in their lives, like the transition from being a student to having a 9-to-5 job, learning vulnerability in a romantic relationship, sexual intimacy with a partner, dealing with changing dynamics in a relationship, and so on. Their love was awkward in this endearing way that felt realistic and true to the initial stages of a relationship, but they grew into a couple who understood each other and learned to share their insecurities. It was a really enjoyable read, which is why it is such a shame that it's ongoing and I'm most likely to forget about it. Most likely going to forget about it. The last manga I read before moving on to Webtoons is Fuyumi Soryo's Mars, a critically acclaimed psychological shoujo series that ran from 1996 to 2000. I read some of it when I was younger, and after rereading it now, 2 things stand out. I was not mature enough to appreciate the intricacies of the storytelling when I was younger, and secondly, it's amazing that 23 years later, this story still holds up as a great one. In pop culture terms, it has aged well. The story starts out with all the cliches you'd expect to see in a high school romance and introduces the two main characters. Kira was the shy and very reserved girl who barely spoke to anyone and just focused on her art. And then there was Ray, a loud, popular playboy who skipped school and had a thing for motorcycles. He was a really goofy boy with a side and darkness that nobody knew. And these two couldn't be more different, but to the surprise of everyone, they were drawn to each other. I imagine the first impression an outsider will have looking at the both of them will be a shy girl and a fuckboy who will most likely ruin her life. But as the story progresses, it becomes clear that trauma is what drew them to each other, and they each saw something in the other person that they thought they lacked as individuals. Kira had a purity and naivety to her, and Ray was wild, bold, and free. The series was dark and addressed different kinds of trauma. There are trigger warnings for this one. You have rape, suicide, and depression. I was stressed out while reading this because I had no idea how the series was going to end, and at some point I was convinced that their love for each other would destroy the both of them. But that love also healed a lot of their brokenness, and the series does have a happy ending. The last section of things I read is Webtoons. There were many of them I read randomly and I cannot remember them all, but I'll just briefly go over the ones I can, starting with My Reason to Die. I talked about this one last month and I was meant to finish reading it in November. That unfortunately did not happen. I did make some progress with the chapters available on Webtoon Korea, but I still have about 5 more chapters to go, and that'll probably take me the rest of the year. I also got caught up on the Webtoon *𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈. I started reading the series last year and dropped it at some point, but it recently came back up on my radar. It's about this rogue mechanic called Shin who tries to pull a fast one on one of his wealthy customers called Jake, but unfortunately for Shin, he picked the wrong one. The story is progressing okay. I'm enjoying it. There are times when I want to slap Shin, but that's okay. We all do stupid shit. The next webtoon I want to talk about is My Bias is Showing. I've seen the title of this one as My Bias appeared as well. It's a short completed series and I read it all in one sitting. It follows the story of a high school teacher called Jun, who is also a K-pop stan. So he shows up to work one day and bumps into his bias from an idol group. This idol called 𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈 happens to be filming a show at Jun's school, and he starts to express an interest in Jun. The two of them get closer and Jun desperately tries to keep his fanboying a secret from 𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈, but as they spend time together, it becomes harder to do that and he starts to notice that he might not be the only one keeping secrets. It was a short, enjoyable read, and if you're looking for something short and sweet, I will recommend it. The last webtoon I want to go over is On or Off. I actually have some physical volumes of this one. I ordered this 4-volume set in July, but the first volume was sold out for a while, and I only received it in November. I decided to try the first volume when it arrived to see how I enjoyed it, and I ended up reading the entire series in one sitting as well because I thought these 4 volumes completed the series, but there is an additional volume available on 𝒻𝓇𝒾𝑒𝓃𝒹𝓈. This is a mature workplace romance with an age gap that follows a college student called 𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈 who is building a startup with some college friends. They get an opportunity to present their startup design to a leading company, and this is where 𝓁𝑒𝓉'𝓈 meets the big shot director of the company, Kang Dae-hyung. The story was funny and just one of those ones you want to keep reading. I did finish the series on 𝒻𝓇𝒾𝓃𝒹𝓈, and it also has a sequel following the same couple titled Work-Life Balance that I plan to read someday. Also worth mentioning is the fact that the physical volumes are full color and uncensored. Do with that information whatever you please. That was everything I read in November, and I don't have a specific reading plan for December. There are, however, some titles I've identified that I'd like to read, but I'll mostly be focusing on doing a wrap-up for my reading the entire year and just reading whatever I like. I am currently reading the last volume of Heaven Official's Blessing. It feels surreal that the series is coming to an end, and I also plan to hopefully finish reading it by the time the 4th volume of 𝓁𝓈 arrives on the 5th of December, so I can dive right into that one as well. But that is pretty much it. As the year comes to an end, I'm curious if you had any reading goals, where were they, and were you able to achieve them? Whatever day you find yourself watching this, make it a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!